One of the best parts about video games is how they give you the ability to travel to lands and experience places you wouldn't get to otherwise. And if the game world is one based in reality, it often kind of makes for a really interesting learning experience you can't quite get from anything else, which is why Japan is a pretty popular setting for many video games. So today on Game Rant, we're going to be taking a look and ranking the 7 best video games set in Japan. Starting off with one called Trek to Yomi. This game is set in the Edo period of Japan and really draws heavy inspiration from classic Japanese films like Kurosawa's in its art style and black and white color palette. While it may look more like an action-focused game, the combat here is pretty limited and takes a backseat to let the story and visuals be the primary focus. And in true Kurosawa fashion, the soundtrack here really shines and complements the intense story of a young swordsman, Hiroki, trying his best to protect those he loves. If you're familiar with the Edo period and classic Japanese films, this game is exactly what you would expect in all the best ways. It really captures the era so well, and the slow-paced combat allows you to take it all in. Switching to a bit of a different vibe now, we have Tokyo Jungle, which is a pseudo-survival horror game in a post-apocalyptic Japan. As humans have gone extinct, you get to play as a variety of animals traversing this pretty detailed landscape. The game has a main story mode where your goal is to discover what exactly happened to humanity, as well as a survival mode that is sort of like a Call of Duty Zombies. This is definitely one of the most unique games set in Japan, and if you're like me and love a good post-apocalyptic game as well as anything set in Japan, this one may be a fun one to try if you can find it, as it was originally released on the PS3. Next up is a game set in a more modern Tokyo setting, Ghostwire Tokyo. While it is modern in its appearance, it changes things up by being a dystopian take on the city, filled with a variety of supernatural creatures. So the story sees you traversing through this dark rendition of Tokyo while trying to figure out why all of its residents have suddenly disappeared. What makes this game pretty unique is how it tries to tie in its lore and abilities that players have into the real-life lore of Japanese mythology and its stories of vengeful spirits called yokai. The first-person nature of this game really lends itself to be quite immersive, so if you've ever wanted to trek through an empty dystopian Tokyo filled with spirits, then this game is kind of made for you. Coming in at number 4 is a game called Judgment, a spin-off title of the Yakuza series. Being a list of games set in Japan, we could not have a Yakuza title on here, but there are just so many to choose from. What makes Judgment unique, though, is how it focuses on the criminal underworld of Tokyo, allowing players to partake in both cinematic fight sequences and pretty difficult scenarios you have to find your way out of. The visual style of Judgment is in line with the other Yakuza games, with this one really leaning into this dark crime aspect and particularly in its atmosphere above everything else. Being able to walk through these dark alleyways and underground syndicates while uncovering dark mysteries just feels so right in this Tokyo setting. Coming in at number 3 here, we have Okami, which is easily one of the more unique games on this list, as you're literally playing a god. This is another great one for the mythology and lore lovers, as you get to control the Shinto sun goddess, Okami, who here in the game takes the form of a white wolf. Okami is a much more relaxing game than most of the other ones on this list, as it's set about 100 years in the past in Nippon, Japan, and its absolutely incredible ink art style makes every moment in the game such a joy. It's not often nowadays that we get games that take cool risks like this being in this particular art style, as it could have easily gone for a more modern looking route even coming out in 2006, but it would have really lost its charm in doing so. And because of that, Okami is just a really wonderfully relaxing, feel-good game with a heartwarming story that still holds up in the modern era. And speaking of the modern era, we of course have Ghost of Tsushima, which is still one of the most visually stunning games of all time, even though it's 4 years old at this point. But with the title releasing on PC soon, I'm sure it's going to somehow look even better. If you don't know anything about this one, it's loosely based on the real-life events of the invasion of Tsushima Island by Mongols in around 1274. This game takes a twist on those events by having a sole samurai, Jin Sakai, survive. And playing as Jin, you get to journey across this island to try and wrest control back from the Mongols in an absolutely stunning and incredibly well-crafted open world that offers immense freedom of exploration. And the story here is really just as incredible as the exploration, as we see Jin wrestling with his beliefs in order to try and do whatever it takes to free his homeland. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have one of the all-time greats, Persona 5 Royale. Persona 5 Royale is highly regarded as one of the best adventure JRPGs of all time, and for good reason. This one takes place in modern-day Tokyo and follows the story of a high school student, known as Joker, as he lives through the course of a single year of his life. And I do mean a single year, as one of the staples of Persona games is the way this kind of progression works, as you choose when to pass time through the days and nights of Joker's life. You have near infinite choices on what to do, who to talk to, who to hang out with, but of course within the constraints of the time that you have. As with other Persona games, 5 features a cast of incredibly written characters with weaving storylines and flashy turn-based combat, While this game is an incredibly long one, if you're able to get used to the social mechanics and other new aspects that the game constantly throws at you within the first 15 or so hours, the experience is meant to absolutely be worth it. And that was 7 of the best video games set in Japan. If you're curious about more games like this, be sure to check out the article below, and whether you find yourself in the streets of Tokyo or ancient Tsushima, I hope you have a fantastic day.